Welcome to Beaded Doilies by Shell. In this video I am going to be creating a warped peyote triangle for you. Here is the word chart. When I do my pieces, you have two ends to your string. Now I don't use needles, so some of my tips might not work as well for most people as most people use needles. But what I do when I'm starting a piece is I take the end that I will not be using for most of the piece, and I take the first 3 beads and I add them. Now I add them in a different order because this order here is for if you're adding them to your working end, not to the other end. So I put on A, and then I go to C, and then B. So we want A, then C, and then B. Then I let them go down the string so that I have enough string to tie off with at the end. And then I go through them, starting with the A, B, going towards the B bead, which is my last bead I added. And I go through all 3, and then I go through the A bead again, the first bead added, and that secures the end of my string so that my beads, remaining beads, are not going to fall off as I add them. So that's how I do the securing of the beads, and I do it with the end that I am not going to be adding more beads with. Then I go to my working end and I start 2. Now as you can see with a warped pattern, this is true for warped squares and other types of warped peyote patterns, is the first beads are in parentheses. That means you add the beads inside the parentheses together. You add them at the same time. So we're going to add an A and a B bead. So we want an A followed by a B. And then with peyote, now here of course you have to be careful because you want to ignore your non-working end. Just pay attention to the working end. You see where the string is coming out, you always go into the bead across from where your string is coming out. Now when you add more than one bead, they might pile up on top of each other. What I do is I take the one on the bottom and pull it out a little bit, and then they lay next to each other the way they're supposed to. Now the next 2 is B and then C, so we will add a B and a C. Now in the parentheses, the first row I call my starter strip. If you've done peyote before, you know what that refers to. But for the rest of the rows, I call the ones in parentheses my corner beads because they are what land in the corner of your triangle as you're going. So then again, our string is coming out here, so we're going to go into the bead across from it. And like I said, if your beads land on top of one another, you take the bottom one and pull it out a little bit so that they then lay next to each other. And then the last 2 is CA, so we want C and then A. And this one can sometimes get confusing. You've got your end string sticking out of this one, and you've got your working string, so you don't want to get them mixed up. So here's your working string, and you're going into the bead across from it. You want to keep your working string out of your end string out of your way as you go. Again, we will pull that one out of so that they're laying. Now at this point, what I like to do is take both ends and pull them tight, because sometimes it'll loosen up a little bit as you add row 2. Okay, then we have row 2 added, As you can see, they're corner beads. They're just laying flat all the way around. That's how it should look after you finish row 2. Then you take your string, and to begin row 3, you first want to go through one of this next bead here. That gets you in place to start your next row. Alright, so then we will start with corner beads, A, B. And we see where our string's coming out, and we go in the one across from it. That one laid fine, I didn't have to pull it out. Then we have a B, so we'll take a B. And then again, your string is coming out of this one, so you want to go into the bead across from it. And it finishes row 3. I mean the first part of row 3, so then we go to the second part, which is B, C for corner. And then we want to C. And as you go, just make sure that end string you keep out of your way so it doesn't get caught in your beading. And then we want CA. And then the last one for this row is A. Here you want to watch where you're going in. You are coming out of this one here, so you want this one directly across, not the one sticking up, because that's part of the row you're working on. You want the previous row bead. And then you want to go through that one sticking up that's part of the row that you just added. And now you're ready for row 4. Okay, so we want the corner beads, which is A, B. You go in the bead across. Fix your corners, and then here we have 2B, but you don't add both at the same time. With Peyote word charts, if there's several beads in a row that are the same, they just put how many of them you will use. So if it's outside the parentheses, you will add one at a time, but you're going to add 2 B's. So we take the first B, just one, and we see where our string's coming out, go in the bead across from it, and then we take our second B, add it, and go through the bead across. And there you've added that part of this row. So now we want BC, and then we have 2 C's we want to add, so we take 1 C, and then 2, number 2, and we have finished that section. Now here is an unusual corner bead, and this happens most of the time when you are doing a ball pattern. I'm not sure if it ever shows up in the kaleidocycles because I haven't put together a kaleidocycle with the peyote stitch. But this happens a lot in the ball patterns. You'll have 3 for a corner bead, corner, instead of just 2. You can put all 3 on at the same time. I don't particularly like how it looks when you do that, so I'm going to show you how I do it. What I do is I add the first and last one. So we want a C and an A. So that's C and A. Then I go through like normal, where you're coming out here, you go through the bead next to it or across from it. Fix the corner. And then I do a turnaround. And this is going to be a little hard for you to follow, but hopefully you can watch or keep up. Is I will go through some beads on this one so that I come back here and end up back at the corner again. So I go down where there's a single bead. There's just a single here, so I can't do the turnaround I need to do. Then this next set has 2, so I do the outside one, and then I turn and do the inside one right next to it. And you have to be careful that you only go through the one bead, so you'll need to bend your piece a little bit so your string or needle will go through just the one bead. Then you're going to cross over to the other side, and you want to make sure that you're going in the bead that is even with the one your string is coming out of. And then you'll head back to the corner that you just finished. So you want to go in the bead that's right next to the one your string's coming out of. And then you just follow the beads going back to the corner. Doing one at a time is probably best. If your string goes to the 2, but they're the correct 2, then that's okay also. Now we are back at the corner, and we're going to add that center bead, which is D. It's a different color now. And then just like before, we go through the bead opposite. And now we want to get back for our row, so we need to go through that bead below the one we're coming out of, because these are new beads, the new row beads, and this is the previous row bead. So you need to be coming through that previous row bead to continue the row. And now we can add the 2 A's on the end. And like I said, if that seems too confusing, you can just add the 3 beads all together. That is a viable option. I just don't like the way that they lay, so I do it this way. Alright, so we have finished this row. Now we want to go through this bead that we added that's part of this row, so we can start our next row. And then usually the last row of a warped triangle will have 1 bead in the corner. That's why this one has that extra one, because you don't make it as far as this one to add the 1 bead, so they make it part of this row. But you'll be adding 1 bead into the corners with 3 beads in between. So the first one is 1 bead. Then we'll add our 3 and you add them individually. Remember, when they're outside of the triangle, you add them individually. That's one of them. Two. 3. And then we add our last bead, which is the single corner bead. And there your piece, other than of course your strings, is complete. Now there's probably lots of different ways of securing your string. What I usually do is I go until I have at least 2 beads next to each other. So I'll go 1, and then these 2, and then I do a turnaround. I go to the one next to it and head back the way I was coming, and then I turn one more time and go through that same one again, and that I've secured the string. And then I don't like, of course, tying off right there, so I go at least 3 more beads. Cutting off the string right there. So I go at least 3 more beads. With the small ones I'll do probably 5 or 6 more beads. And then I'll jiggle it a little to spread out the beads a little so that the string is not going to slip back as easily, and then I will trim it off right there. And I do the same with the short end as well. And then you have your completed warped peyote triangle. If you have any questions, or if you found anything in the video a little confusing, let me know in the comments, and I will be very glad to try and make some other videos to make it a little more clear. Also, I plan to do some shorts for each of the individual steps of this little pattern, so that maybe you can watch the shorts and be able to pick up something maybe that this video didn't show as well. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you make lots of peyote triangles. Happy beading!